The sun had set, and the evening air was filled with the warmth of a barbecue, the scent of steaks sizzling on the grill, while a classic blues song floated through the yard. Suddenly, a voice cut through the tranquility like a blade. "That's the house my sister is taking," declared Jessica, standing at the edge of our lawn. My wife, Emily, stiffened, her drink slipping from her hand. I dropped the tongs in shock, and our dog, Max, retreated a few steps, tail between his legs. There she stood, Nancy, the president of the neighborhood association, accompanied by a woman in large sunglasses and a crisp white outfit. The air around her was thick with a perfume that was almost overpowering. The woman, Catherine, looked over our house like she was inspecting an art gallery, then pointed at it with all the authority of a monarch. "My sister Catherine has decided this is her new home," Nancy announced, her tone dripping with condescension. "You have 1 month to leave." I stared at her, unable to process the words. Emily and I exchanged a glance before bursting into laughter. Not because it was funny, but because it was so utterly ridiculous. Nancy didn't even flinch, maintaining her smug expression as she stepped forward, handing me a letter on a fancy piece of paper with the neighborhood association's logo on top. It was a mock legal document, citing some emergency reassignment clause and a family priority condition. Our home was being handed over to Catherine for her needs, and I wasn't even mentioned by name. "Are you serious?" I asked, still in disbelief. Nancy flicked her neatly styled hair and said, "The board has approved it. Start packing." Catherine, her face glued to her phone, added, "The kitchen's getting a full remodel, by the way." She didn't even look up at us. Emily made a sound, her temper rising, but I grabbed her arm, holding her back. What they didn't know was that I, Daniel Stone, was a federal judge currently handling a case against the very neighborhood association they thought they could control. I wasn't assigned to it, but my colleague Judge Montgomery was. I nearly laughed when I saw Nancy's name as the defendant in that case. Now, it was my turn to play dumb. "Interesting," I said, scanning the letter, fighting to hide my amusement. "Move-in date." Nancy, oblivious, said, "The first week of next month. Catherine's hired movers to get your stuff out before she starts changing the place up." Catherine, now wandering around her front porch, started taking photos and discussing plans for a hot tub. Nancy lectured us about the importance of community values and sacrifices for families in need. I couldn't help myself. "What hardship is Catherine dealing with?" I asked, my voice barely concealing my sarcasm. "She's recovering emotionally from a divorce," Nancy said, dead serious. "It's in our mission statement." I bit my cheek to keep from laughing. Emily stood there, paralyzed by disbelief and anger, while Nancy dropped her next bombshell. She'd already updated the neighborhood records to show Catherine as the new owner and even scheduled a locksmith for Friday. "Will the police be involved?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "They won't be necessary," she replied smugly. "You'll be gone." I leaned against the railing, the audacity of the situation sinking in. This wasn't just an overstep of power. It was an attempt to force a judge out of his own home with a piece of paper that had no legal standing. "Tell you what, Nancy," I said, keeping my calm, "I'll grab a few things to make this easier." She smiled, thinking she had won. "That's the spirit." Catherine chimed in, "Leave the curtains. They're perfect for my aesthetic." Emily shot me a look, but I nodded and went inside, retreating to my office. I closed the door, pulled out the file labeled Neighborhood Association versus Stone, and added some footage from the security cameras, along with a transcript of their ridiculous demands. I called my colleague Montgomery. He laughed as I recapped the situation. "She tried to take your house?" he asked between chuckles. "That's bold, I'll give her that." "Oh, it gets better," I said. "She's got a locksmith coming and a so-called emotional hardship clause." Montgomery stopped laughing. "I'm moving the hearing up. Let's get this on the record." I glanced outside. Catherine was measuring our porch while Nancy was inspecting our garage. I opened the door with a smile. "Just called the insurance company about the transfer, in case anything goes missing," I said. Nancy faltered, but nodded in acknowledgement. "What are you doing?" Emily whispered. "I'm letting them dig their own grave," I replied. "I'll hand them a shovel when the locksmith shows up." Later that night, Catherine posted a picture of our house on social media with the caption, "Future home vibes." Nancy commented, "The HOA's got your back, sis." I took a screenshot and added it to my growing collection of evidence. Nancy had no idea that I wasn't just some helpless homeowner. I was about to destroy her case. The next morning, Nancy marched down our street with a clipboard, followed by a tall man in a polo shirt. His name was Patrick Green, a shady property assessor I recognized from several previous HOA fraud cases. He wasn't licensed and was under investigation. Patrick was here to appraise our house for Catherine, or so they thought. I thought the transfer wasn't happening until next month. I said, eyeing him. Nancy waved it off. Routine inspection. Patrick's certified. Catherine needs renovation plans. I stepped aside, gesturing them in. Always happy to help the community. They barged in like realtors, with Patrick scanning the house with a laser while Nancy criticized the outdated paint and lighting. Emily looked up from the living room, shooting them a glare. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone icy. Nancy smiled, unfazed, just making sure there are no surprises for Catherine. "Oh, there'll be surprises," Emily muttered under her breath. I casually asked Patrick if he was licensed. He stammered a yes, naming a board that didn't exist. I smiled, knowing the lapel camera I was wearing was recording the entire conversation. Nancy marched upstairs, discussing plans to tear down our bedroom wall and expand into the neighbor's property. I asked her about the details, and she just smirked. "We'll manage," she said dismissively. When they left, Patrick handed me a document with falsified lines claiming I had agreed to vacate. I nodded. "My lawyer will review this," I said. Nancy's face tightened, but she smiled. "Routine," she said. I sent the document to the state licensing board and called Detective Lisa Wong from the HOA fraud unit. "You caught Patrick lying on camera," she said. "That's a gift wrap case." The next day, Nancy taped a property transfer pending notice to our door. The neighbors began whispering, texting me to ask if we were really moving. I responded with a simple HOA mix-up. Nancy, still smug, waved at us as she passed. What she didn't know was that her actions had triggered a federal investigation. After a tip from one of the board members, I flagged her case as a priority. Prosecutor Lena Hayes was already on it. That evening, I met with board members Ellen, Marcus, and Theo. Ellen was upset, revealing that Nancy had forged her signature and threatened fines. Marcus and Theo confirmed there was no reassignment clause and that Nancy had been manipulating people for years. "I'll testify," Marcus said. The next day, Nancy's grip weakened. Marcus revealed she had scheduled an HOA meeting to finalize Catherine's takeover. I offered our home as the venue. On Sunday, the board members arrived with evidence exposing Nancy's fraudulent tactics. Nancy and Catherine walked in, and Nancy demanded the meeting start. "Welcome. The meeting's in session," I said, taking control. Nancy presented a forged document claiming Catherine's transfer. I slid it across the table. "Explain this." The board questioned it, and Nancy's empire collapsed. She stormed out, leaving Catherine in tears. Emily and I pushed for Nancy's suspension and a county audit. Days later, Nancy's house was foreclosed, and Catherine left her. Ellen became president, passing reforms. The next Wednesday, Nancy was arrested. I added a sign reading, "Evicted by Truth."